Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and today we're back at it with another spoiler video. It seems like we have a spoiler video pretty much every week these days, and it's kind of crazy, but they did just toss out the very first batch of spoilers for the Marvel Spider-Man Magic the Gathering set, which, I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence about. Part of me is really excited at the prospect of just getting to play a game of Magic, just completely all in with Spider-Man. But there's another part of me that's dreading the idea of constantly having to come up against Spider-Man in games of Standard when I'm trying to just play my fantasy game. So I don't know, I'm excited, but I'm also kind of bummed, and I don't know where I'm gonna lie when the dust settles, to be completely honest. But regardless of that, I'm still excited about the prospect of new cards, and regardless of the flavor of Spider-Man, I'm excited about the prospect of new mechanics and what the new cards are going to be doing functionally. So I am still super excited about seeing spoilers for this set and covering them all, so you can look forward to me being on top of all of it for sure. But we're going to dive right in. First of all, they showed off the play boosters and the collector boosters. The one thing I do want to point out about the play boosters, a whopping $6.99 USD for these play boosters. That is so expensive. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the Final Fantasy set is $5.99, so it was already an extra $1, and now Spider-Man is looking like it's going to be $2 extra. I might be wrong about that. The Final Fantasy set might be the same amount as this Spider-Man set, but either way you slice it, Universes Beyond sets are looking to be a premium and pricier than your normal set, which is just for the play boosters too, so I'm a little bit worried about how that rolls downhill into draft and affects the ability to draft the set economically, realistically with your friends, but I guess we'll have to see when the set finally drops if it's manageable or not. And then obviously we've got collector boosters as well. Moving on, we've got a bundle. Now this is a normal bundle. It's going to include an assortment of packs and a spin down, die and all that sort of stuff that the normal bundles include, with a guaranteed foil in every pack, and then also the normal pre-release kits, your standard 6 packs, 1 pre-release promo, spin down life counter, and all that good stuff. But where things start to get really interesting is with the Spectacular Showdown box set. Now this set in particular includes a number of packs, but it also comes with 6 specific cards that are commander only. And one thing I need to point out about this set is we're not getting any commander decks for this set like we normally get for every standard set, right? Every standard set usually comes with an accompaniment of a number of commander decks that include cards that are only legal in commander and not in standard. It's sort of the other side of the coin to the actual base set. We're not getting those in Spider-Man at all, and I think that's partly because we have 5 of them coming for 𝑇𝑒𝑟𝑟𝑎𝑛_CEE, and then 4 of them coming for Final Fantasy, and it's just product fatigue, product overload, which I guess Wizards is finally learning, at least a little bit, to not overload us with product, although, I mean, they're giving us 6 sets this year, and 3 Universes Beyond sets, so I don't know, maybe I shouldn't speak so fast, but either way, we're not getting traditional commander decks in this set, but what we are getting is this Showdown box set that includes these 6 cards that are only commander legal. They're not standard legal, but you can get all 6 of them in this one box set along with a number of packs from the actual standard legal set, and it's just all wrapped up in a nice bow in one box. So it's kind of interesting. We're still getting a commander product. It's basically just It's almost like getting one commander deck, except there's only 6 new cards in it, and just a number of boosters. So there is a little bit of a commander product here, but nothing crazy, and I kind of like that. And then they're replacing what they would normally do for commander decks. They're giving us theme decks, one each theme to each of the 5 different mono colors in Magic, and those are going to be standard legal. So we are getting 5 pre-constructed decks with this set. And that's the next thing I'm going to talk about, and then right after that, we're going to actually talk about the 6 cards that were spoiled today. So before we dive into the 6 brand new spoiled Spider-Man Magic the Gathering cards that were unveiled today, I just briefly want to go over this idea of the 5 starter decks. So we have one for white, and it shows Spider-Man on the front here. We have another one in black, and it shows Venom. This one is green. It has another version of Spider-Man. And then we've got a red one that has a version of Spider-Gwen. And the last one is the blue deck, which has Spider-Man 2099 on the front. Now, the way these decks work is they are standard legal, and each of these decks includes one of the 30 card half decks for the specific color that is labeled on the box. And then it also includes another 30 card half deck from one of the other 4 colors chosen at random. So for example, if you were to buy the blue deck, it's going to come with 30 cards that always come in the blue deck that are all blue. And then it's also going to come with 30 cards that might be black, or they might be the red one, or they might be the white one, or they might be the green one. You don't know, it's going to be at random. So if you buy one of these welcome decks, you know for sure you're getting one of the half decks that you definitely want, because that's the one that's labeled on the front. But the other half deck could be any of those colors, and then you end up with a 2-color deck that is standard legal right out of the box that you can just shuffle up and immediately start playing standard, which I think is kind of exciting because it gives us a better chance of getting newer players interested in the idea of playing standard easier without having to invest a ton of money and just right out of the box just join in. So I'm kind of excited to see how well these do and if they catch on. I think the concept in the greater scheme of Magic in general of bringing back pre-constructed decks that you can play in standard right out of the box is a cool idea, and the way they're doing it with this, where it's sort of halfway between pre-constructed decks and like a jumpstart style product, is super interesting. So I'm excited to see where they land. But let's move on to the cards, because God knows that's what we're excited about, right? The first card of today is Sensational Spider-Man, a 3/3 legendary spider-human hero for 3 mana in the colors of Azorius. Whenever Sensational Spider-Man attacks, you tap target creature defending player controls and put a stun counter on it. Then you may remove up to 3 stun counters from among all permanents. Draw cards equal to the number of stun counters removed this way. That's a lot of text. But basically you get a 3 mana 3/3 that whenever it taps, you get to tap something down and put a stun counter on it. Now, what's interesting about it is it says you can remove up to 3 stun counters each time you attack and draw that many cards. So you don't have to remove all 3, right? You could remove 1. Like, you could be playing a deck that is super deep into stun counters, be putting tons of stun counters on everything, and notice like, hey, that one creature over there, they've got 2 stun counters instead of just 1 on them. So maybe I can afford to take 1 off, draw a card, and still have everything not untapped next turn. You can kind of make decisions like that about which creatures are more important to keep down with the stun counters, and, you know, maybe some of them might not be as important, and you can start removing the stun counters to draw extra cards, which seems interesting, especially, you know, if you're including more cards in the deck that have ways to create stun counters or interact with stun counters, maybe proliferating. It seems really, really cool. So it does give us a little bit of a hint at where they might be going mechanically with the base set of this, and I would be very surprised if there wasn't a lot of stun counter stuff to represent the web slingers, and maybe even a lot of proliferate in there as a secondary mechanic. It'll be interesting to see. One last thing I want to note about this card before we move on is he has the hero subtype, and one thing that you'll notice about every card that we go over today is it either has the hero or the villain subtype. So I think these hero and villain creature types are going to be super important in the grand scheme of things in even the standard set, the standard Spider-Man set. And I think there are going to be a lot of cards that interact with heroes and villains as a creature type. And I think mechanically it's going to be an important part of the set. I don't know exactly how deep it goes yet, but if you pay attention to all of the type lines, it's pretty obvious they're doing this for a reason, and I would be very surprised if there wasn't some sort of deep mechanic in place that addresses this hero and villain duality, which I think is really interesting. But we're going to move on, and we're going to talk about one of those villains, and that's Green Goblin Nemesis, a 3/3 legendary goblin human villain for 4 mana in the colors of Rakdos. It has flying. Whenever you discard a non-land card, you put a +1/+1 counter on target goblin you control, and whenever you discard a land card, you create a tapped treasure token. Kind of interesting. Card's not like super good, but being able to get +1/+1 counters every time you discard, and you know, or treasure counters if you discard lands, It's nothing to scoff at. This is giving you value with literally every discarded card. It works super well with the new self-discard archetype that was introduced in Aether Drift, where you're trying to discard your own cards to get things to trigger. And this is just gives you even more triggers for that kind of a deck, which I find really interesting. And if you could just discard a bunch of land cards all in the same turn, you just make a bunch of treasure tokens. There has to be a way to break that, right? Like slam the green goblin down, play a card that makes you discard your whole hand and redraw or whatever, and maybe you just have a bunch of lands and make a bunch of treasures and then just like go off with some huge bomb. I don't know. There's potential here for this card to be bananas, but at the end of the day, I do think it's a little bit plain, and I think these commander only cards, these 6, there are only 6 that are commander only, and the rest of the entire set is standard legal, but these 6, I do think the power level is a little bit pared down, and I think the real sweet stuff is going to come in the actual standard set. But let's move on. Next up, we've got Pumpkin Bombs, which is Green Goblin's signature weapon. An artifact for 1 red and 1. You can tap and discard 2 cards to draw 3 cards, then put a fuse counter on this artifact. It deals damage equal to the number of fuse counters on it to target opponent, and they gain control of this artifact. So the pumpkin bombs are like a hot potato. You keep passing them around back and forth, and they get more and more and more fuses. And every time it gets fuses on it, whoever controls it gets to choose where that damage goes. And it becomes more and more damage every single time. But even regardless of that, just being able to tap this and not have to pay any mana, discard 2 cards, draw 3 cards, is insane. It's going to be even better if you're using the discard payoffs like the Goblin we just saw and some of the stuff that we got in Aether Drift. Imagine if you have Monument to Endurance out when you use this ability. You get to get 2 triggers off the Monument to Endurance and draw 3 cards and put a fuse counter on it and ping someone. That seems really interesting. And the other thing you could do with this card that I think is really nuts is you could play, we've gotten a handful of cards that allow you to steal stuff back that you own but don't control. And they've always been super relegated to like niche cards that don't really see much play. There's not a lot of use for them. But if you're using cards like Pumpkin Bombs, where you're giving them your own cards, but you really want to keep them as much as possible, maybe having some of those cards in Magic that have been just sleeping, lying dormant this whole time, not really seeing much play, that allow you to steal back your own stuff, could be super interesting. So, I don't know. You could also just activate this, and then in response to activating it, sacrifice it to like a bargain ability or something like that, so that nobody gets it, but you still get to discard 2, draw 3, and ping for 1, which is pretty good if you never have to deal with your opponent being able to use it. So I think there's a lot of value in the Pumpkin Bombs. I'm actually more excited about Pumpkin Bombs than I am about the Green Goblin himself. But next up, we've got Doc Ock, Evil Inventor. He's an 8/8 legendary human scientist villain. Of course he is. And 8/8, I guess each of the limbs is 1/1, right? The 4 robotic limbs and his 4 normal limbs. He costs a whopping 7 mana in the colors of Dimir, which is an insane amount of mana. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, target non-creature artifact you control becomes an 8/8 robot villain artifact creature in addition to its other types. Now, when I first read this card, I thought it was really bad. I was like, a 7 mana for an 8/8 that turns something into an 8/8. That's so plain. That's so boring. But then when I reread it, I was like, wait. It's not until end of turn. Which means every single combat step on one of your turns, you get to turn a non-creature artifact into an 8/8. They can start piling up on top of each other. You could just have a whole bunch of 8/8s. And the more I thought about it that way, I was like, yeah, maybe this guy is good. He's still super expensive. He still has to survive or he doesn't do anything. And he's still a vanilla creature. But I have to feel like there's some way to abuse this, right? Maybe in a reanimator shell, get him out quick and just start turning your artifacts into creatures way too early and just take over the board. I don't know. Maybe even just in fling decks, right? Making an 8/8 every turn and just flinging it at your opponent's head could be wild. There's gotta be a cool way to use this guy. He does seem too expensive and a little hokey. You know, you really need him to stick around for multiple turns in order for him to be worth it. And for a card this expensive, I don't know. But it's definitely worth exploring, because if you can just go super wide and just keep pumping out 8/8s, it gets pretty nutty, I think. So it'll be interesting to see if anyone can make something out of this card that actually works well. But next up, we've got the Grasping Tentacles, his weapon of choice, a sorcery for 3 mana in the colors of Dimir. Target opponent mills 8 cards. You may put an artifact card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. That's not bad, right? I mean, maybe in a mill deck where you milling them 8 cards for 3 mana by itself might be kind of good and help you get super close to winning the game. Or maybe as a sideboard guard against certain decks that are running very problematic artifacts. This would have always been super good against like the One Ring or something like that. Pretty interesting. It's worth noting you can grab something that wasn't milled. You can grab an artifact that's already been in that player's graveyard. You don't have to grab something that's specifically out of the 8 milled cards, which I think makes this a little bit better. That being said, it does seem kind of like a sideboard card, but I'm glad that they're going to the lengths that they are to really go all in on the flavor of what they're trying to do first rather than the mechanics, because I mean, they're only going to get to do a Spider-Man set once, right? And I think it's way more important that it feels like Spider-Man and that you can pick up these cards and just play them by themselves without the rest of the Magic cards in the mix, just this set, and it feels like you're just playing a Spider-Man card game. And so doubling down on the flavor so that when you do that, it feels as good as possible, I think is smart. Because I think the way that I'm going to enjoy this set the most, and I think there are some people out there that probably agree with me, is by keeping it separate and almost playing it like it's its own thing, its own separate game. Obviously not in Arena. On Arena, I'm going to have to abuse whatever the best cards are for the decks that I'm building. But outside of that, when I'm playing for fun with my friends, I do think this set's going to be best as its own sort of standalone game, in a way. So anyway, going super deep on the flavor, I think is smart. And the very last card spoiled is Venom Deadly Devourer, a 4/4 legendary symbiote villain with Vigilance and Menace for 4 mana in the colors of Golgari. You can pay 3 mana, exile target creature card from a graveyard, and when you do, put X +1/+1 counters on target symbiote where X is the exiled card's toughness. This is pretty crazy. So first of all, we have confirmation here that symbiotes are going to be a super relevant archetype, a super relevant creature type within this set, right? We already know that heroes and villains are going to be a big thing, but for this to be able to target symbiotes specifically, it really does lead towards hinting at the fact that pretty much every symbiote in the Spider-Man lore will probably be present in this set. I mean, why else would you go full on with a Spider-Man only set rather than just a Marvel set that has Spider-Man among other Marvel stuff within it? Unless you were going to go super deep on literally every Spider-Man character, right? So I really think every single symbiote is going to show up in this set. I think it's going to be a super relevant creature type, almost like elves are, you know, in other sets, where when elves show up as a creature type, they really show up. I think symbiotes are going to be the same thing here, and the fact that he can target any symbiote to put counters on kind of seems awesome. And the fact that it matters as far as toughness is really interesting too. Is there some way to maybe hybridize like a symbiote deck with a toughness matters deck with like Arcades and stuff like that? I don't know. Seems pretty wild. You can exile a creature from any graveyard, not just theirs. You can do theirs, you can do yours, you can do whatever you want. And that's kind of interesting. But the last thing I really want to point out about this is I really hope, I really hope that we get a Black Suit Spider-Man card, which we almost definitely will, right? But I hope that it's a symbiote creature type. And I hope that we can actually make a Venom Spider-Man team-up deck where their mechanics actually benefit each other and actually synergize together. I think that would be super fun, being able to put a bunch of +1/+1 counters on your Black Suit Spider-Man with Venom's ability because you can target symbiotes. Just seems awesome. All of the fan service that they're just dumping into this set is pretty apparent to me. It looks pretty wild. So that's gonna do it for today. As soon as more spoilers drop, I will be jumping on them right away. So if you haven't already, please subscribe. Tons of content on the way. I've even got some crazy deck techs that are coming soon that I'm really excited to show you guys. No, they're not all going to be Mardu. The last 3 have all been Mardu, but I promise there's some new original unique stuff on the way. Be sure to catch me live Monday through Friday over on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/QuarantineCapricorn. Because if I'm alive and I'm breathing, I'm there and I'm streaming. And for the love of God, hit the like button. Just help me. Hit it. It sends the video out to so many more people. The algorithm likes me. The algorithm's like, ooh, massaging my shoulders and telling me that I'm a champion instead of a loser, making me feel like a loser. I don't want to be a loser. I want to be a winner. Help me be a winner.
Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck techs, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.